I think now is a good time to be able to bring this up because we're about 4.5 weeks through the season. So if you're looking at the official 30-day marker, we have just passed that. But have there been any big takeaways for you in terms of the baseball season, whether that be a team or two that has been hot and cold or just the way that you've been playing, perhaps player props, totals, anything of that nature?
Yeah, a lot of player props that I get involved with now, whether it's home run props, stolen bases, total bases. And I think my biggest takeaway so far is that, enlarging the base pass, changing the rookie rule where, you don't have to hold out a guy until May, is playing a factor in a lot of these teams that are making a spark early on, whether it's the Pirates or the Diamondbacks or the Marlins. These teams are getting on base, they're playing small ball and they're running, and it's so far turning a nice little win total for those teams.
Yeah, it certainly has been. And one team that stands out to me, we'll get into their game for Tuesday in a second, is the St. Louis Cardinals. And I didn't think that the St. Louis Cardinals were going to be winning the World Series or anything like that, but I feel like I'm living in some sort of a bizarro world where they're 10 and 19 because I've been on this earth for 30 years. And if you had told me that in every year that I have been alive, the Cardinals have won no less than 81 games, but no more than 93, I would totally believe you because that is just what the St. Louis Cardinals do. They don't necessarily win 100 games, but they never bottom out. What has really went wrong for the St. Louis Cardinals? Because honestly, the hitting has been fine, and the pitching, it appears to be not great, but not horrible as well, but they just haven't been able to pull out these games.
Yeah, it comes down to a lot of different factors. One, I think, like you kind of said, their lineup on paper is one of the best in major leagues. It truly is. And they have a lot of pitching depth, they have a lot of hitting depth, but it really just hasn't been showing up enough. I mean, they're sixth in OBP, 12th in OPS, and they're also 21st in total runs per game. So when you kind of factor in all those aspects, you're looking at sort of the premium positions. And unfortunately, one of the guys who is constantly, year after year, one of the steady contributors in the major leagues is Nolan Arenado. And right now, he is absolutely abysmal and he's holding down a premium spot, hitting fourth in the lineup. So I do think there's a lot of shakeups that need to be happening. And I think they're leaving a lot of guys on base, and that's really hurting their run production.
And I do think that it is interesting to turn it forward to this Tuesday game where they're going to be hosting the LA Angels. Patrick Sandoval is going to be on the bump for the Angels, and it's Steven Matz going for the St. Louis Cardinals. And it's just hard for me to take a look at a pitching matchup, see Steven Matz on there, and think that he should be better than anyone else at this point. As if you have faded Steven Matz 5 times this year, you have cashed all 5 times. And I do think that Patrick Sandoval is a better pitcher. I'm not sure how you gauge this game, but I mean, the overall help around Steven Matz is a little bit better, but I just can't bet on Steven Matz at this point.
Yeah, obviously there's a contract incentive to get him in the rotation somehow and make it work. It hasn't worked out so far. He had a better outing last time out before it just kind of unraveled the second time through. And I feel like the Cardinals organization is kind of looking at him as, you have two, maybe three more starts left, and you got to show us something a little bit more. Maybe that brings something out of him, but I don't think it's a bettable angle right now when you're talking about the St. Louis Cardinals with Steven Matz on the bump.
No question about it. It's been a rough state of affairs for the St. Louis Cardinals, and I mean, if you take out the Steven Matz starts, it's still not been good for the St. Louis Cardinals, but it's been a little bit better as we're being joined by Rob Donaldson. Does a great job with the All Eyes podcast right here on the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. And when it comes to gauging some of these teams that are a little bit up and down, like the San Diego Padres are another one of those teams that you just expected a little bit more from their offense. How do you gauge this team? Because with the Padres, I've been taking a look at a lot of their unders when they have been at home, on the road. I do think that it's a little bit more favorable to overs. And well, when you go to Mexico City and you find a total that is south of 20, when it gets to 20, you probably don't want to be taking the over. But when it comes there, you're able to score some runs. But I do think that they play one of the more fascinating games on Tuesday against the Cincinnati Reds with Michael Wacha, who's been, in my opinion, a little bit unlucky taking the bump.
Yeah, what's really interesting about them is kind of like we talked about with Nolan Arenado. They have a few guys that are kind of like that, whether it's Manny Machado, Juan Soto, and holding down premium positions in their lineup and kind of underperforming, whether it be from a, driving and runs perspective or just getting on base in general. And obviously, Fernando Tatis missed a lot of games already this season, just came back last week. So they're dealing with that. Their pitching, as far as their starting rotation, has also underperformed. You look at Blake Snell, he finally turned out a quality start and got a W on the board for him tonight, but that was his first of the season. So I think they will be a team that trends upwards from this point. But as far as this matchup, I do think there is a lot of value with betting on the Reds.
Yep, I agree with you. And I also did take a look at the under. I don't know if you have any take on the total at an 8.5, but I really like the way that Graham Ashcraft has been pitching. And with the San Diego Padres, I like betting their unders when they are at home because even last year, they were averaging more than a full run more when they were on the road rather than at home because San Diego is always notorious for being a pitcher-friendly ballpark, and that has been the case much of this season as well.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think this game is something around the ballpark of 3-4 or 3-5 at the end of it. And I do think the Reds have a really good chance at winning this game as well with Graham Ashcraft on the bump. And like you kind of said, Michael Wacha, the ERA doesn't reflect a great early start to the season, but he has been pretty unlucky and he has been throwing some pretty good innings in there. So I do kind of lean towards that under, and I also lean towards the Reds kind of sneaking a win out here.
And here's how I know that things have really went off the rails with Major League Baseball. Right now, we've got one total of 7 that is on the board for Tuesday, and it involves the New York Yankees in Yankee Stadium because they have been the best under team in all of baseball. Before we dive into this game involving they and the Cleveland Guardians, just what have you made out of this Yankees team? Because they're right now sitting at 500. The pitching has actually been really good for them, and Garrett Cole has been arguably the best starter in the big leagues thus far this season, but for this New York Yankees offense, especially with Aaron Judge now hitting the injured list, I just don't know who's hitting for them other than really Anthony Rizzo.
Yeah, the crazy thing about the Yankees lineup is that even with Aaron Judge in the lineup, they weren't producing runs. I mean, you have to go back 11 games to find one time where they've scored over 4 runs, and if you extended even 15 games back, they've only done it twice. So that just kind of shows you how this lineup has been performing. And now Aaron Judge is out of the lineup. Anthony Rizzo isn't performing to the best of his abilities. He's still probably the most consistent guy there, along with DJ LeMahieu. But you look at the young guys, Oswaldo Peraza, you look at Volpe, and you look at Cabrera in the outfield. These guys are just not producing in the early goings, which, you have to let them develop as the season goes on. But it just hasn't been very optimistic in the early goings here.
No, it has not been. And for the Yankees, they have not been a profitable team thus far this season, but the saving grace for them has been, if you've been betting on their unders, they have been going very well. And this is going to be a total of 7 with about as strange of a pitching matchup as you're going to find. Tanner Bibby, who had a really nice first start against the Colorado Rockies, but that was a home start against the Colorado Rockies team that since the beginning part of the 2022 season registers 3.1 runs per game on the road, by far the fewest of any team in the big leagues going up against Garrett Cole. To me, this feels like, honestly, a good buy spot on the New York Yankees. Not a game where I think that the Yankees are going to light the world on fire and score 10-plus runs or anything like that, but I think that Garrett Cole is going to be able to shut down a Cleveland Guardians team that we're talking about the Yankees' efficiencies on offense. Theirs are right there on par with the Yankees.
Yeah, I could see that angle playing out. I'm actually on the Guardians in this one. I do think that fading this Yankees lineup right now is the move to make just because of the name brand, because Garrett Cole's on the other side, and this line is kind of indicative with it being almost relatively low. I think that the books are definitely wanting people on the Yankees side on this one, thinking that they're going to be due for a win. But when you're producing only 3, 4 runs, maybe even 2 or 1 run per game in your last 15, I just don't think you can trust that throughout a full game. So I would definitely lean away from taking the Yankees, maybe just to stay away, but I'm actually liking a Guardians bet here.
And this Guardians line, to your point, it has went way down. They open up in a lot of spots right around about a plus 165, plus 170, what have you. They are all the way down to a plus 145 at DraftKings. Heck, where I sit at Circa, all of a sudden the money line on the New York Yankees is not such a heavy text. Minus 154 is still more than what I know a lot of people would like to lay, but this is all of a sudden becoming a little bit more formidable, and with the Yankees run line, you're going to be finding that anywhere between plus 125 and plus 130, which with this Yankees game, who knows if either team is going to be able to get past 2. But what I do know is that Rob Donaldson, he does an amazing job of taking a look at the great game of baseball, and we've been touching upon a lot of these games in this past segment with him. We're going to keep it going, and we're going to get some of his thoughts on the way that he has been able to utilize player props, and we're going to do that on the other side, right here on the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Rob, I know you were talking about it in the last segment. You have been doing a little bit of adjusting with regards to your player props, and they've been going quite well for you this season. What have been some of the things that you have been taking a look at in terms of player props, and any guys that have really been profitable / not profitable, because I know that there have been some teams, especially teams like the Baltimore Orioles and company, that have been utilizing more stolen bases and have a few unearthed gems, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I think the Baltimore Orioles are one of the most complete teams in major leagues, if not the most complete team. And a lot of that is because they defend, they steal bags, they play small ball. And when you're playing small ball, that means you're taking walks, you're getting on base. And when you're getting on base and you have guys who can run across your lineup, they're going to get hit and runs going and they are going to try to steal bags. And I think that adds a lot of inherent value when you're just talking about whether it's total bases over, hits over, RBIs or runs or even steals. And I've definitely been adjusting my scope on that, especially with the changes in the rules.
No question about it. I do think that that is so important to take a look at. And with the stolen bases, they certainly have been up this year. And I believe that Mullins and Mateo are the top 1-2 punch in terms of stolen bases. Both of these guys have a double-digit amount of stolen bases this year. So that has been interesting to take a look at. And I know that you do a few strikeout props as well. Where have you really found a lot of value? Because I've talked to a few people in the past that do a lot of strikeout props, and I noticed that a lot of guys are able to find good value on more of those mid-tier guys. Not necessarily like, for example, for Tuesday, the Garrett Coles of the world, but more or less a guy like a Patrick Sandoval, I think, is a very good example. Taking a look at guys like that, is that sort of the same approach for you, or is it just sort of a whatever the day brings sort of approach?
So it's a little bit different. I don't necessarily target a type of tier as far as pitching talent goes. What I actually like doing and what I found is as far as like a market inefficiency, so to speak, is taking unders on really popular pitchers because these overs are being set at 7.5, 8.5. Spencer Strider today was a great example. His total was set at 8.5. He got at 8, and he really had to strike out 2 in the last inning just to even get there when he was well over 100 pitches. I feel like there is a market where a lot of people are wanting to bet strikeout overs for guys like Sandy Alcantara and Zach Gallen, and I totally get it. Their swing and miss stuff is electric and it's exciting, but when you're going up against a lineup, say like the Nationals, who are really plate disciplined, and a lot of people don't know that, you can take advantage of people maybe not noticing that this team doesn't really strike out a lot, despite the fact that the other guy in the bump is a dynamic starting pitcher that strikes out a lot of players normally.
And you never know when you're going to have something strange happen, like, I don't know, Luis Garcia throws 8 pitches and then cannot continue on. There's probably some people out there that are complaining to sports books requesting a refund. If you took the under, you are not going to be doing any of that. You're just going to be counting up your money as well. So I do think that that is always a good approach to take. And that does lead into a really interesting game that we are going to be seeing for Tuesday, because I just mentioned it. The Houston Astros, they literally had to get 27 outs out of their bullpen in this last game, and now they're going to be taking on the Giants, with it being Anthony DeSclafani against Hunter Brown. And I like Hunter Brown, but the one issue that I do have with him is that sometimes he jacks up his pitch count a little bit too much. For a tired bullpen, that's going to be a little bit rough, and you got to think that the Astros are going to be hoping and praying that Hunter Brown can lend as much length as humanly possible in this spot. But with the Astros, find them anywhere between -165 to -170 favorites. What do you make out of this one? Because I do think that it is a little bit of a unique circumstance.
Yeah, and if we want to add to the uniqueness of this matchup, the Giants are coming off that Mexico City series where their bullpen got absolutely wrecked. I mean, the balls are flying out of the yard in that first game, and their managerial staff didn't really know how to react to that in terms of, do we need a new pitcher in there? Like, what exactly is going on? And so they have a lot of racked up pitch count, especially after tonight as well. So I do think an over is a good play here. I love Hunter Brown, like you said, and I do think he ends up getting his Ks in this game just because the Giants' plate discipline is not there, inexistent, if you want to say. But I do think this could be a game where he might run into trouble early, and we might see a first 5 over or a full game over as well.
Absolutely. I set my total more closer to a 9 rather than an 8. So I'm in full agreement with you. I do like the over in this spot, as we got Rob Donaldson. Does great work over at the LIS podcast. He's joining me right here on the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. And how about if we take a look at, well, one of my favorite movies from high school / college was We're the Millers. And you know what? This pitching matchup has 2 Millers, as we've got Mason Miller, who's going out there for the Oakland A's, and then we've got another Miller in Bryce Miller for the Seattle Mariners. And with the Mariners, they are anywhere between a -127 to a -136 favorite, and we thank the good folks over there in Seattle and Oakland for giving us a good movie reference. But that said, how do you view this game? Because with Oakland, what has really been profitable for me for them is, for one, not betting on them at all because they have been terrible, but two, they've actually been the best over team in all of baseball because their pitching has been so bad.
Yeah, you can't trust this A's bullpen whatsoever. An angle I've actually found with the A's, and it's been hit or miss in the early goings, but when you're kind of looking at the full season scope, is actually kind of profitable, especially as of late, is taking first five unders or even the A's on the run line through the first five or on the money line through the first five. I mean, through their last four games, they have been winning outright in the last in the first five innings, that is. And Mason Miller is a guy that does have some really exciting stuff. And once you get into that bullpen, it's such a wild card. They could give up 11 runs on their own, but when you're looking at Seattle and them throwing out Bryce Miller, who is making his first career start, he's been smacked around in minor leagues this season. It's an interesting dynamic if you are leaning towards taking the Mariners here.
Yeah, total of 8, and I recognize that the Mariners have not been the best team in terms of batting average really the last few seasons, but even at a pitcher-friendly ballpark like Oakland, I do think that there's some good value. And would you maybe entertain like a live betting situation as well with the Oakland A's? Because you just mentioned it. This is one of the worst bullpens I've ever seen in my life. They and the Chicago White Sox, north of 6.5 bullpen ERAs. And if you've just been fading these bullpens live all season long, I'm sure that it's been highly profitable.
Yeah, I think them and the White Sox are in the same boat. And for those of you MLB bettors who've been betting for multiple seasons now, if you remember Alex Colomé with the Twins, this really feels like the same thing with the A's. Once you get in that 7th, 8th, 9th inning, despite them having a lead, don't count on it being there. And even bet reverse run lines in some of those spots if the top of the order is coming up for the other team, just because there's nobody in that A's bullpen that I would fully trust at all.
You mentioned Alex Colomé back when he was with the Minnesota Twins. I'll do you one better. Fernando Rodney, or better yet, Fernando Rodney, because every single time you had a bet on a game involving Fernando Rodney, and you had the side that Fernando Rodney was on, you knew that your ticket was toast. Oh, that
Absolutely
was so
correct.
bad. I mean, I don't know if you ever had a reliever that was worse to you than that, but for me, Fernando Rodney is the guy that still haunts my dreams to this day, and he's been out of the league for like 4 years.
I absolutely agree. Fernando Rodney, Alex Colomé, they're the same kind of thread.
Oh, man, some of those guys, it's just absolutely rough. And I mean, right now, haunting the dreams of many MLB bettors as well is the Pittsburgh Pirates. Right now, there's no number up on this game. We don't know if it's going to be indeed Roncy Contreras or not. They're trying to figure out their pitching situation. Meanwhile, with the Tampa Bay Rays, it's going to be Javi Guerra, who's going to be the opener, who just got DFA'd by the Milwaukee Brewers, by the way. The only place that it seems like he could pitch is with the Tampa Bay Rays. But what have you made out of this good start for the Pittsburgh Pirates? Because I've been of the mindset that we're going to see a little bit of regression. And with how cheap the numbers were, I was actually able to get in a few bets in their last series or two. But still, with the Pittsburgh Pirates, it's been really exciting to see. And I've sort of been taking a middle ground approach myself, thinking that, yeah, this is not the same team that lost 95-plus games the last few years, but I just can't see this withstanding with this Pirates team.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if this is the Orioles of last year in terms of playing small ball, having enough guys in their lineup to make a dent, but maybe not having the starting pitching to really, finish off and cap a great year. I mean, the guys that have been carrying them right now in terms of their rotation are, Johan Oviedo, who is kind of a castaway from the Cardinals last season. Vince Velasquez has been a journeyman type guy. And then Mitch Keller, who is finally having a good season, and he has some good stuff, but yeah, I question whether that's sustainable. I do think the bats are legit on this team, or at least somewhat capable to continue doing what they're doing right now. But I'm agreeing with you. I think this team kind of fizzles out at some point in time, just a matter of when.
And it's been very surprising that the Oniel Cruz injury has not caught up with them as well. So we shall see if that's going to be the case moving forward.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.